Welcome to So I Married a Film Critic, a discussion between a professional film critic and lecturer and me, his wife of 20 years, who just likes to watch movies for fun. I'm your co-host, Julia.
I'm Barry the Film Critic. Hello, everyone.
And tonight we are talking about a creepy movie from 1985, Return to Oz.
This is a sublime film that came out at a really bizarre time. This is one of my favorite periods, talking about the Disney dynasty, because as we know, Disney now owns just about everything. They own every single IP out there, with the exception of just a few things. But there was a period where Disney almost went under, and it was this summer of '85 because they released a movie called The Black Cauldron. That movie lost so much money that it was the park admissions that kept the lights on, kept that place going, because they almost went completely bankrupt over that movie, over the loss of box office, over the fact that they didn't know what they were doing. Walt Disney died in 1967, and there was just a 15-year period where they're going, we don't know who we are now, because we don't have our visionary at the helm, and they were putting out movies. They were basically like reflections of what was popular at the time. Superman came out, so they released Condor Man. Star Wars came out, so they released The Black Hole. And in between this weird period where they're releasing movies like The Fox and the Hound that didn't really work, or Robin Hood, which felt really derivative. I like a lot of these movies, by the way, but it really wasn't classic Disney. And in the meantime, some amazing films kind of snuck under the radar. One was Tron. Another one was a film called Dragon Slayer, which I also love, and it's incredibly violent. You would believe it's a Disney movie. And then this thing, Return to Oz, which Disney owned. They had the rights, and it's like, of course, we're Disney. Of course, we're going to do a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, but not the movie. The books by L. Frank Baum, including Ozma of Oz and The Land of Oz. So you have this film, which is, I got to say, very ahead of its time, because it's terrifying. It's a fantasy film. It's about a world where a little girl is the one who knows the truth and is the gateway to this fantasy world where adults disbelieve her. I mean, this is Harry Potter, this is Narnia, this is the Hunger Games, this is everything that works now. But in 1985, there was nothing like this movie. And as you can imagine, this film was a disaster when it was in theaters. This was a big summer movie for '85. This came out the same summer as Back to the Future, The Goonies, Rambo, First Blood Part 2, fun movies. And then this thing comes out. And I mean, word got around very quickly. It was rated PG, but people are going, don't take your kids to this. This is really a scary and a stressful film.
Yeah, I can imagine being a parent in 1985 and being like, oh, a sequel to Wizard of Oz. That's great. And then being like, now my kids have nightmares for weeks on end.
Yeah, for me, it was probably longer than weeks. I didn't see it in the theater. I told you this. My mom and I were walking past the theater marquee. My mom's looking at the posters like, oh, Perry, let's go see this. This looks great. We had like an afternoon together. And I looked at the poster. I remember thinking something about that looks really creepy. And I'm like, no, I think I was in second or third grade. Second grade, I think. And mom's like, oh, okay. And man, do we dodge a bullet, because mom was ready to take me right then and there.
Your mom would have freaked out.
Yeah, and I'll speak a little bit more about it later when we get into it, but I did see this film on the big screen at the Esquire Theater in Denver, Colorado, one of the biggest screens in America, and I got to go to a midnight screening of it. It was a prestigious print, and to see this movie on a giant screen with surround sound, it pulverized me. And I know this movie really well, and at that point, I'd probably seen it like a dozen times, but seeing it on the big screen, like, yeah, this film it's a lot.
I don't actually remember when I first saw this film. This may have been my second or third time watching
I probably
it.
subjected you to it once.
Yeah, no, this was at least my second time, maybe my third. But this movie is terrifying. And I don't know if Kansas is scarier or Oz is scarier.
Well, I've been to Kansas. Kansas is definitely scarier.
It's all a nightmare. Like her real life and Oz, everything is a nightmare.
Well, let's get into it. Fairuza Balk was chosen over a lot of candidates. I'd love to know who I wonder if there's audition tapes of Reese Witherspoon or what, Elizabeth Shue, whoever it was. Elizabeth Shue would have been too old at that point. I wonder who didn't get the role of Dorothy Gale, if there's anybody we know. But yeah, Fairuza Balk was chosen. I heard from thousands. But Fairuza Balk plays Dorothy Gale. This is her film debut, and I gotta say, she's wonderful. She has me from the very first scene. Not only does she have such beautiful eyes, but haunted eyes. So when we first meet Dorothy Gale, she can't sleep. she's looking out her window, watching the stars. But I mean, it's not like a dreamy Judy Garland gaze. It's like this is a kid who has seen some stuff.
Who's been
Traumatized by the events of the first film.
Well, it's been 6 months since the tornado, and she's not the same. She can't sleep. Annie M wants to take her to a doctor.
Annie M is Piper Laurie from Twin Peaks, and also Carrie White's mom from Carrie. Mm-hmm. Cover your dirty pillows. That Piper Laurie.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
typecast is the mom of kind of unstable young women.
Creepy mom, creepy aunt. Okay.
She does it well.
So the next day, Dorothy finds a key on the property, and it says Oz on it, and she shows Annie M, and Annie M's like, it's just your imagination, and she wants to take her to this doctor. And Dorothy's like, but I don't want to go. And she's like, you're no use to me on this farm if you can't help me. And you can't help me if you're not sleeping and you're falling asleep during the day.
I think she's being passive aggressive though, because Uncle Henry isn't doing jack. We see that Uncle Henry is just sitting around. I guess he's kind of hitting the bottle.
No, but his leg was broken. And now he's just being lazy because she's like, his leg's not broken anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think she's taking out some, she's like kind of projecting onto Dorothy. Anyway, it's not a healthy environment. And, it's interesting because ever since Dorothy emerged, Auntie Em, I had dreamt of you and the Scarecrow. It seems like what was endearing at the end of The Wizard of Oz is now like, oh my gosh, she won't stop talking about this world. But you know what? It's Kansas. I've been there. There's nothing to talk about in Kansas. So I get it. All she wants to do is talk about this fantasy world. I totally get it. But because this is right before the 20th century. So there's no radio. There's nothing.
Yeah.
So this kid has this vivid imagination. She met these fantastical characters. Or so we think.
It's 1899 in the middle of nowhere. So.
Yeah. So like the fact that she has this extraordinary fantasy life is, pretty remarkable for her. It's troubling to her caretakers, her aunt and uncle, who are, watching over her, because of course it sounds like the ravings of a crazy person. And that's, I want to say from the get-go, that is something that the film wants us to consider. How much of this actually happens? Does any of it happen? And there are moments where fantasy and reality seem to intertwine, and we'll talk about that. Okay. So anyway.
Well, so Annie M takes Dorothy on this trip.
Oh, and Toto is mourning the loss of Dorothy, and it's like, oh man, this movie is like cutting deep because Toto is like,
he wants to go with them on, to the doctor. He doesn't know where they're going, obviously.
Toto's having like a Stanley Kowalski streetcar moment, like Stella. It's like bark, howling like, man,
it is heartbreaking.
They found like a dog. Like, can you find a dog that can like just like the saddest dog? Oh, perfect. Like this dog is killing it. So sad to watch like Dorothy and she's like, is he gonna be okay? And Auntie Em's like, yeah, he's gonna be fine. They cut to like Toto's like, don't go, Dorothy, you don't know.
Okay, so they go to this. Okay, it's not even a doctor. Like, where did they take her? Some kind of
sanitarium?
Yeah, some kind of weird clinic.
They found it in a newspaper, and it says, what was it, like electrical treatment? And it's Dr. Worley, and his amazing electrical current.
I know, basically electroshock therapy.
Yes.
Well, and so Dorothy's explaining Oz to him, and she's going through all the characters that she met.
And I told you, like, this is a detail that's disturbing. I don't know if, and it's been a while since I've read Baum. I don't know if it's in the L. Frank Baum book or not, but she says that the Tin Man, he basically used an axe to chop off all of his human parts and replace them all with tin parts. Definitely not in the Julie Garland film. I don't even know if that's in Baum. I can't remember if it is or not.
Things of nightmare.
But it's a pretty wild detail, and I think I understand why any adult at this point would be like, this kid's having some problems.
Yeah. So Annie M just thinks like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. I'm gonna leave this child here overnight, and this is what the doctor says about his process, because she's like, will it hurt? And he's like, the brain produces excess electrical currents when there's a blow to the head. Now we have a means of controlling those currents. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is no.
Well, this is pseudoscience. This is what the fact that they had access to electricity is what's novel about this. Their understanding of it is not.
Right, because this whole clinic has electricity and lights and everything, and nobody really has that yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right, so Bye, NEM.
Yeah.
Takes off. She's like, see you tomorrow.
And I guess the movie lingers on Dorothy being alone in her room, such as it was. The door's locked, and she looks out the window, sees Auntie M, her carriage, horse and carriage going away. And there's this long shot where she's just sitting by herself. She's got a little mini jack-o'-lantern. Mm-hmm. And we hear the squeaky wheels coming close and close to the door. I think that's the first, for me, that's the first the first tip off that like, oh, okay, this is not going to go well.
No.
This is really scary.
This is really bad. Well, but there's another girl that visits her, this little blonde girl. Mm-hmm. And she's just kind of like talking to her, but she's like, I'll come back later, And we don't really know what she's doing.
And we're constantly seeing her through a window or in a reflection in glass. So she's like this girl who keeps materializing through glass. And so the film goes back to that.
I mean, so it's like nighttime, and when they finally come and get her and put her on this bed, and they tie her down. And
boys, is a grim group. The head nurse, I want to say Nurse Ratched, that's not the name of the character. She's played by Jean Marsh. Jean Marsh is a treasure in the acting community, a theater legend. She also played Queen Bavmorda in Willow right after this, and she's extraordinary in that too. If they found somebody to match Margaret Hamilton, that's what they did. I mean, they found
that's
who
true.
can scare kids, and this actress is sublime.
And they put her in this black dress with these
killer shoulder pads,
pointy shoulder pads.
Yeah, she's like a 1956 car. It's like a Ford Fairlane with the shark fins. I mean, she looks like
a witch.
You could like open a bottle cap on her shoulder pads. Yeah, it's amazing. She looks great.
So they take Dorothy into this room, and they're like getting the machine all going, and they're gonna put these
electrodes. It's like this. It looks like headphones where they're gonna put it
on her ears. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're going to kill her.
So they do put the thing on her, and they're gonna electrocute her, but then the power goes out, and you're like, oh my gosh, thank God.
When I'm watching the scene where they strap her to the bed and they're taking her down the hallway, and the movie really lingers. I mean, it takes its time. Even the suspense, and not only suspenseful, but it's like, can this movie possibly going where we think it is? I'm really like paying attention to the actors, and I'm trying to get like the story that we're not seeing. Like, is this just another day here for them? Do they enjoy this? Do they enjoy like putting little kids in their place? Like, what is going on? Are they sadistic? Are they just like, like, oh my gosh, like we took this job, we're working for this madman? Or are they like, maybe this will be the kid that gets cured? I'm trying to read what's going on with the staff here.
Okay, the staff look like they haven't slept in like weeks. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's something very unstable about all of them. Do you think maybe they've had some of his treatments?
Yeah. The like guys who are.
That's how he pays them in shock treatment. Just got one more hour in the shift, then I get the shock.
That'll be 10 treatments for you this week. Yes.
I brought my own bit. I'm ready.
My brains aren't quite mush yet, so let's get this done. But they go to like try and fix this electrical thing, and there's like screaming all throughout the building, and then the little blonde girl comes to rescue Dorothy.
And remember, listeners, we are talking about a Disney film. This is a Walt Disney Presents movie.
Yeah, and these kids are like 11, 12 years old. Yeah. Okay, but she says, because Dorothy's like, what's all that screaming? And the little girl says, the screaming is patients who have been damaged and they're locked in the cellar.
Oh my gosh.
What?
Wow. Like, are there any deleted scenes?
I mean, this
because if so, can we bump it up to an R rating?
I mean, this is like that movie where the kids are stuck in that house, that house of horrors. When their tongues are cut out.
Oh, geez, the people under the stairs.
Yes, it's like the people under the stairs type of situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's bad.
Yeah.
Okay, so the girls they run out into the storm, and they end up in the river after being chased. And
they're being chased by Nurse Wilson, the head nurse played by Jean Marsh. And there's a moment where I kind of wonder about, again, this idea of fantasy and reality. because the girls are like, we're not taking any chances with there's no way they're going back.
They're like, we'd rather drown in the river.
So they jump into the river. It's a raging storm and the water's rushing. And at one point they're going down the water. This big wooden crate pops up. But the way it pops up, it almost looks like Nurse Wilson raises it with her hand. Did you notice that?
No.
It almost looks like she summons it. And considering that Nurse Wilson later on appears as a figure in Oz who is a sorceress, I don't know. I do wonder if,
how they're connected.
I think the film is, trying to be ambiguous about it, but I mean, it looks like she summons the crate to save these girls. I could be wrong, but every time I've seen the film, that's always the impression I get from that moment.
Yeah. Well, Dorothy's the only one in the crate. We don't know what happens to the little blonde
Presumably
girl.
she dies, yeah.
Yeah, we
drowns.
don't know. But she falls asleep and she's in the crate and she ends up in a pond and her chicken Belina just shows up in this crate with her.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the film has all these echoes of the prior film. It acknowledges all of the prior characters in The Wizard of Oz, but those characters are all, we learned, frozen and out of commission. So Belina is the new Toto and it's a talking chicken. And I got to say, the animatronic effects are so good that often I couldn't tell when the switch happened.
Yeah.
Because that animatronic chicken, the movement, it's great. Even when you can clearly tell it's a mouth moving, but the way it twitches, it blinks. I mean, it's a great puppet.
So we find out, but earlier before Dorothy goes to the doctor, Belina is her chicken on the farm and she is having a hard time laying her eggs. So
yes, so that's
just a little detail.
That's a plot point that actually becomes very important in the third act, very strangely. Yeah.
So they wake up and she's like, oh no, we're in this big pond. And the pond just keeps shrinking and shrinking. She's like, oh, actually, we're not. But then Dorothy realizes that they're in the deadly desert. And if you walk on the deadly desert, you just turn into sand and die.
I love it because it sounds like a child's game.
Right.
Yeah.
So she's like, come on, Belina, if we have to stay on the rocks. And so they have to walk across the rocks and get to the grass. Is the deadly desert, I mean, that wasn't in the original movie. So that was in
not.
the books.
Yeah, it's in the books. Yeah. And
Okay.
it's basically, there's Oz, there's just like miles and miles of the deadly desert. Then, of course, we learned the Gnome King's castle and his mountain are on the other side. Yeah.
Okay. I love the detail of them finding the lunch pail tree.
Yeah.
Like,
it's very quirky.
It is,
and
very
you gotta find one that's ripe because God forbid, you open up, your lunch pail pod, and you learn that your bread is like green.
Well, she's like, I gotta pick one. Yeah, that's ready.
That's right.
And she has a ham sandwich inside.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's cool and it's funny because the pail clearly says lunch on it, so it's very peculiar.
I don't know. I just like that because she's like, well, I'll take one now and I'll take one for later. I'm like, smart thinking, Dorothy. Yeah. You don't know how many lunch pail trees are around Oz. We don't know.
Yeah, so like these scenes are cute because the chicken has like a Mae West voice, and she and Dorothy are slowly exploring and things, but you see like this rock that has eyes and is watching them. And it's the first time we see Will Vinton's extraordinary claymation in this movie, because this is claymation. This is the California Raisins, The Adventures of Mark Twain. This is Vinton when this is prior to CGI, so like what he was doing was like just miracles with clay. But it's funny because you've got these cute scenes of like, Belina, let's go see what's over there. And then the rock figure will vanish out of view, and then suddenly it looks like he's in the pits of hell going, Master, you won't believe what I saw. What did you see? Master, they've seen the Emerald City. Find them. And then they cut back to, look, Belina, a worm, So it goes back and forth between these scenes, like oh, interesting. We're like cutting between Oz and hell, it seems.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rocks are kind of creepy. Like,
well, it's such amazing animation. I mean, they're giving very specific facial expressions that the rocks look smug and self-satisfied and devious. Like, man, those are great looks.
yeah. And they're supposed to keep an eye on her. So they just kind of show up at random times. Dorothy finds her old house, the original house that came in the tornado.
The original site of the original murder. There should be like a little chalk outline where she crushed the Wicked Witch of the East Head.
R.I.P.
Yeah, exactly. What if like there's like some Wicked Witch supporters and they've got like some flowers?
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, there's nobody there. Yeah, so yeah, it's an odd detail. And she's like, there's my room. And there's like just trash everywhere.
Yeah, and then
squatters.
And then she sees the yellow brick road, and it is jacked.
This is a moment for me. It's like, wow, to think about the original film and to think like, hey kids, like you want your childhood completely destroyed. Watch this scene where Dorothy is just like in a panic. She's running. And Bellina's like, what are you doing? She's like, it's the yellow brick road. Like even the way Fairuza says the line, it's like, oh, it just guts you. Because like this used to be something that was fantastic and beautiful. And it looks like an earthquake hit it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bricks are everywhere. It's like you thought this was beautiful and quirky? No, it's destroyed.
All your childhood dreams.
Sorry, kid. It's mud and dirt now.
I know. So Dorothy's running. She gets to the Emerald City. Emerald City is destroyed. There's people that are turned to stone.
Yeah,
there's
stone statues where there used to be people. And then, of course, there's a bunch of maidens dancing who are all headless.
Headless, yep. And then there's like graffiti, beware the wheelers. You see,
who put that there?
I don't know.
Yeah. That's really weird.
That is weird.
There's like one guy who's like
he's like, if anybody comes around here, I'm gonna make sure they know.
A graffiti artist in Oz. Yeah, that's how bad things have gone in that city.
Yeah, we see the Tin Man and the Lion are all turned to stone.
Yeah, all of our favorite characters, everyone is at stone statues everywhere.
And then the Wheelers come and scare the crap out of Dorothy and us.
And us, yeah. It's interesting. Like they look like extras from Starlight Express because they're dressed in like these really interesting petticoats, but they've got like new wave eye makeup on. They've got like the Duran Duran eyeshadow. Mm-hmm. And they're freaking scary. And they've got these hoo-ha masks that are on one part of their head, but they lift up their heads. They're even scarier with the real face. I mean, it's plus, and they have no legs or arms. They're just like these long appendages with wheels on the bottom of them.
It's terrifying.
I gotta say, like, how do they come? I mean, I think it's such a novel idea for a villain because it's so upsetting. And then a detail that I've always wondered about because they corner Dorothy and Bellina down this hallway, and man, boy, is that the stuff of nightmares. And this movie's just like, hold my beer. And they hide in this closet.
Well,
and
her Oz key opens it up.
Yeah, the Oz key works. And she's having a conversation with the head wheeler through the keyhole, and he says like, "We're gonna tear you apart." I'm like, how?
Yeah, like are they gonna roll over her?
They're gonna roll over her. They're gonna use their teeth. I mean, yeah, that bothers me. Like, how?
Yeah.
Is there one with like
Do they take their wheels off?
Yeah, they take wheels off, but like, do they have one wheel where it's like a pizza slicer?
Oh,
yeah.
Are there like spikes that come out?
Maybe.
I mean, again,
I wouldn't doubt it. It's Return to Oz. This movie isn't playing.
No,
this movie's not messing around. This is. It's like if you can envision this, if you can envision it, and it's something that would give Stephen King the chills, it's probably in this movie.
You have to come out sooner or later. And when you do, we'll tear you into little pieces and throw you in the deadly desert.
I haven't done anything to you.
Isn't that a stolen lunch pail in your hand? Isn't that a chicken in there with you? Chicken! The Gnome King doesn't allow chickens anywhere in Oz.
Who's the Gnome King?
Who is the Gnome King? Who is the Gnome King?
Well, here we find out that chickens are not allowed in Oz, which is hilarious. It's like, how did Bellina... Obviously, somebody knew that chickens aren't allowed, and they put Bellina with Dorothy because Dorothy didn't bring her. But it's like just chickens. Like, no, can they have cows? Can they have other things?
Well, but it was a ham sandwich in that tree, right? So there are pigs in this, presumably.
Yeah, it's just chickens.
But does the tree go and like slaughter the pigs and like make the sandwich?
I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be
It's a
surprised
very-
if the trees are alive and they're doing like going to the slaughterhouse. Like this movie is crazy.
Insane scene that is.
Okay, so
Oh,
we
man.
find out that there's a gnome king now.
The Gnome King is running the shots, and he apparently is the satanic figure we've been seeing vaguely in the animated scenes
Yeah.
that intercut with what's going on with Dorothy.
So the Wheelers leave, but they threaten to kill her and throw her into the deadly desert.
They're so nice.
I know, and the way that Firuza Balk plays Dorothy, I mean, she just seems pretty unbothered by a lot of these things.
Well, it's Oz, and she even says it like, I don't know, she's used to the strangeness of it. It's like, it's like Alice in Wonderland. It's like, okay, I've been here, I know how weird this is. I'm kind of accustomed to it. But at the same time, she's very direct with them, which I like, because something that's consistent with this film from beginning to end is it's about, among many things, it's about how adults can be so awful to children. They're awful because they're condescending and sarcastic and verbally mean. And Dorothy is constantly calling these jerks out for being that way to her.
Mm-hmm.
It's constantly happening. And it even happens with the Wheelers. The Wheelers are threatening her, like,
And she's not having it.
no.
So she finds a TikTok man in
Yes.
this closet area, and she winds him up. And she finds out that the Scarecrow put him in there to wait for Dorothy. And he tells her, like, I've formulated a plan to get past the Wheelers. So he has, like, a thinking, wind up, movement. It's like there's, like, 3 different things he does.
Thinking, his actions, and what
like
else?
another one.
Yeah.
But anyways, he has to keep getting wound up by Dorothy or like stuff. He'll just kind of like power down.
He's the coolest. I mean, he's like the original RoboCop. He's got this huge pot belly, but he's got this little mustache, which is how his mouth moves, and he's got this big old hat and these beautiful blue eyes, and he sounds like Antonio Banderas. I kept thinking about Puss in Boots.
That's funny. I didn't hear that, but
And because this is 1985, there's no computer effects. There's really somebody inside of this thing moving it and causing it to move. Yes.
really?
Yes, there is, I believe, a little person who's upside down. And when it came, very uncomfortable. They're upside down. There's uncomfortable positions. So the hands are where the feet are, and they're moving it that way, and they're moving it back and forth. Yeah, so no, it's not like a puppet. This is like R2-D2 stuff. Wow. This is ancient, this is a very old. And by the way, it's Deep Roy. Deep Roy is a performance artist, an actor. He played all of the Oompa Loompas in the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Yeah, Deep Roy as TikTok man. Yeah, pretty wild.
Wow. Okay, so he says he's formulated a plan to get past the Wheelers. And so they leave, and the Wheelers are right there waiting for them. And he just kind of like spins around and like knocks
He
them
Donkey
out.
Kongs the crap out of them. Yeah, it's great. It's fantastic. He just spins in a circle, and they're all like attacking him, and they swarm him, and he just beats them. Very satisfying, I must say.
But he grabs onto one.
Yes, the head of him.
And gets this Wheeler to tell him that Princess Mombi is the only one who knows where the Scarecrow is. And we're like, who's Princess Mombi?
Yeah.
Oh, because the Gnome King says like, oh, she'll never get past Princess Mombi.
Yeah, and I love the way the Gnome King's like, they'll never get past Mombi.
Yeah.
It's like, geez, movie. I don't even know who this person is, and I'm scared.
Yeah, the Wheelers are scared of Mombi. So, because they're kind of like, show us where she is. And he's like, no.
Yeah, if Starlight Express is afraid, then we need to be nervous too.
So apparently her palace is right there in Emerald City.
It's a skip and a jump.
It's the only thing that has really survived, or else she took it over.
Presumably, yeah.
After everything fell down.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and we learn at the end of the film how she acquired that house and how she acquired her appearance. Yeah.
Okay, so Dorothy and TikTok go into her palace, and
man, it's beautiful. Everything is shiny and golden,
lots of
and
mirrors.
it's beautiful.
And so we meet Princess.
This young woman playing a mandolin all by herself.
Yeah, it's like a little harp, and she's just like looks so nice and sweet.
Yeah, and she's got like, I don't know, like what, how to describe her outfit. It's like, it's like casual day at Elton John's house. Like it's this really opulent thing. I think it's got feathers in it. It's pretty wild.
So she takes Dorothy to her head room, which I think the first time I saw this, this was the most terrifying scene for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's up there. For me, I mean, the thing that's so insane is, so she goes Takes Dorothy into the room. We learn very quickly that this is, some people have wigs or dresses. She has this, she has this Sex and the City size closet full of heads in these little glass cases that she keeps. And the heads are all alive. And to evoke that, these poor actresses, you don't see their necks. Apparently they all have their heads through these fake holes, and they're lit in a way that it looks like just these little decapitated heads, like on these little stilts. But again, the actresses, in very subtle but very noticeable ways, their eyes are moving, they're blinking, like the film is making it very clear that these heads are all alive, magically so, but they're waiting to be worn, and they're watching Dorothy very carefully as she goes down the hallway. Yeah, and it's it's so creepy.
Yeah, so Mombi takes her head off and puts on a different head. And then she tells Dorothy, like, oh, you are attractive, like beautiful in an unconventional way. Like, you're not going to be very pretty when you're older, but, I'm going to lock you up until you grow up, and then I'm going to steal your head.
Which is, other than the head part, it's exactly the kind of thing an adult would say, an awful adult.
Yep.
Talk about how attractive she is or isn't. Yep. Talk about how I want to keep you here until you grow. Again, we're talking about, the really fractured and hurtful things that adults do to kids. And this movie's about how children sometimes are able to react to that and stand up to it. Dorothy is, she is not a victim, even though she is being, put in these
victimized.
Awful... Yeah, she's being victimized, but she's not a victim. She refuses to be. But yeah, these adults are doing terrible things. When Dorothy first appears before Mombi, her head is Sophie Ward from Young Sherlock Holmes. But whenever the heads change, it's always the voice of Jean Marsh. Oh. It's always that voice. And it's very, because Jean Marsh is a very recognizable voice. It's a detail that it's very chilling. Very chilling.
So, Dorothy is stuck in a tower now, and TikTok has wound down. He's useless at this point.
Yes.
And so Dorothy meets Jack Pumpkinhead up in this tower.
Yes, all the characters, it's like, okay, we don't have the Scarecrow, but we got Jack Pumpkinhead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mom? 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 Is that you?
No. I'm Dorothy Gale.
Oh. For a second there, I thought my mom had come back.
Huh? What is this? A man or a melon?
A pumpkin, if you please. My name's Jack. Jack Pumpkinhead. May I ask a favor of you, Dorothy? Would you please check my head for signs of spoiling? Any soft spots? How does it feel?
Very nice, sir.
Oh, thank you. I've been alive such a short while, and I'm afraid of spoiling before I've seen anything of the world. Could you put some of the rest of me together again? If you can just tie that arm on, and then my other leg is falling off too. Are you sure you're not my mom?
I'm sure, Jack.
Well, my mother built me to scare that awful witch, Mombi. She stood me in a place where Mombi would meet me, face to face. And along she came. Sure enough, she was scared. But then she was angry. She has a terrible temper.
I know.
Somebody made him he wasn't alive, but like somebody made him, his mom, he says.
It was an Ozma. We learned later it was Ozma.
Oh, okay. Ozma made him to scare Mombi, I think.
Yeah.
And then she took her powder of life and made him come alive and then imprisoned him.
Do you think when she saw a pumpkin head, she thought this thing's making fun of me? So she locked him up there?
Probably.
How dare you?
Yeah.
I get to have the cool heads, not you.
So Jack Pumpkinhead tells Dorothy about the powder of life, which is in Cabinet 31 with Mombi's original head.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God.
Oh man, can't wait to see that. Please, movie. take us into the collective essence of our nightmares, please.
No. So now Dorothy has to sneak into the headroom.
Yeah, this is the scene that scares me the most. It still does. Yeah. So Dorothy goes into the room.
Okay, but never mind. Like Mombi is asleep,
Yeah.
headless. Like
Right.
she doesn't wear a head when she's sleeping.
Which is the least scary thing in the scene, because like there's all these other heads that are asleep and they're all kind of like slumped over to the side. It really sucks being a decapitated head, by the way. Fun fact. So she's going, but they're all like, they've got little lighting in their little boxes. So it's like, you know where all the heads are.
Right, and they're all
You don't want to
labeled.
put on a Monica when you want a Rachel, you don't want to put on the wrong one. Maybe you want a Chandler, you want to mix it up. And by the way, and there's all this like silly stuff where they cut back and forth.
She has to steal the key from Mombi while she's sleeping.
Yeah.
Because it's around her wrist. Okay.
Right, yeah. And that's, so they occasionally cut back to Jack Pumpkinhead, and he's like wackadooing, like doing all these wacky little like, whoa. And you know what? Fine. This movie needs every semblance of humor it can get. Like, I don't care. I don't care if there's puns. I don't care, because like this movie is as dark can be. So I'm like, fine, give me some Care Bear level humor. I don't care, movie. Like, I'll take it. Because when we cut back to Dorothy, so sure enough, she gets the key. So she opens the cabinet, and it's a tight, juicy close-up. It's not like, you're no. I mean, like, you are there, all right? The puts you right there. Dorothy is going nose to nose in this cabinet. There is Mombi's head asleep, and it's Jean Marsh, the nurse, and the powder of life is right there next to her. So of course, Dorothy knocks over a little bottle inside there and wakes her up. So I saw Return to Oz for the first time on the big screen about 10, 15 years ago now, when I was at the Esquire and giant screen. And at this point, I'd seen it like a dozen times. It was a midnight screening. Had a lot of people there in the theater I get to talk to in the lobby. Like, oh, you grew up with this? I grew up with this, but I've never seen it on the big screen. Or there are people going like, I didn't even know what this movie is. I just thought I'd check it out. And it was funny because as the movie progresses, you could hear people in the audience going, oh, like you could, the sanitarium scenes in particular, people kind of like laughing uncomfortably, like, oh, this isn't what I thought it would be. People who had never seen it. Anyway, so we get to this moment where Mombi's head wakes up. But when Jean Marsh opens her eyes and goes, Dorothy Gale, oh my gosh. I don't know that I've ever been so scared in a movie theater in my life. I was frozen. And then Fairuza Balk takes the powder, runs down the hallway, and wouldn't you know it, all the heads are awake, and they're looking at Dorothy, and they're screaming as she's running down the hallway.
Oh, it's terrifying.
My God. So, and like, and whatever, the headless Mombi wakes up. That's the least scary thing in this movie. That's how scary it is. It's like the headless monster wakes up, and it's like, all right, you're like the fifth scariest thing in this movie.
Okay. Was that scene scarier than when you saw like A Tale of Two Sisters?
That's an interesting question. All right.
Because you said that's the scariest movie you've
That's the
ever
scariest.
seen.
Yeah, and I won't describe the scariest scene in that movie, which is hard to even think about. It's so scary. That's all with my buddy Zach. Yeah. It's up there. And another one is Pee-wee's Big Adventure, the scene where we see Large Marge. Honestly, like Marty and I still talk about it. We saw it with our dads in Clifton, New Jersey, and my popcorn flew up into the air, like raining popcorn from it. It's true. And I guess the only other one I could think of, it's so stupid because the movie is really not that terrifying. John Carpenter's last movie that he's made to date is called The Ward. It's with Amber Heard. And the last scene of that movie, it's a fake out jump scare. Somebody jumps out of a mirror. I just didn't see it coming. So I literally jumped out of my seat. I was sitting with my dear friend, Cody Green, and Cody was laughing at me. I'm like, I know it's not even that scary a movie, but like it was the last scene of the movie. I was like fiddling for my car keys. I thought the film was over. And suddenly this woman jumps out of a mirror and oh my gosh, it jumped out of my seat. But yeah, this is, I'd say it's up there. So I'm so petrified now. I'll let you describe what happens next.
Okay, well, Dorothy runs back up to the tower with the powder of life, and she's like, Jack, you haven't done anything. So Jack is supposed to be putting together this like sleigh that they're gonna like.
It's a lot of trust that she's putting into this character.
Yeah,
I mean,
she gave Jack a big job. And
it's like making it like, okay, Goofy, you're gonna fly this plane. Yeah, okay. Like, no, you don't. No.
So
Not the guy.
it's like this moose head attached to.
He's called a gump for some reason.
Well, okay, but
Yeah, he's got
nobody knows what that is.
He's got, well, he's basically like a green moose. He's a green moose head who talks.
Okay, well, it only talks because she puts the powder of life on
Right,
him.
and he's back to life. And it's a really funny thing. It's like, well, I was in the woods and I heard a loud noise and now I am. I'm having kind of an existential crisis right now. I'm attached to a couch. I'm a freak.
Well, yeah, it's like his head attached to a couch, and then they attach like
These little palms so that he can fly.
branches.
Yeah, and he's 2 couches tied together.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, anyways, poor Dorothy has to like get this thing going, and
It's pretty great, yeah, because Mombi is running up the stairs, so they all jump into this thing like it's the Millennium Falcon. Like, go, go, go! And they push it out a window, and sure enough, even though this thing is like who am I?
held together by like 2 bungee cords.
I had a whole life as a gump, and now I'm a couch. This really sucks. I'm plunging to my death. Oh, I'm gonna fly! So he flies at the last minute, and it's glorious. The music soars, and Mombi's like,
She's like, she thinks they're gonna crash to the ground, and they don't. So she's just
she's doing the Wicked Witch thing. Where she's like, and they fly away. She's like,
yeah,
it's great.
So Mombi sends the Wheelers to capture them.
Which is hilarious because I don't always make the association when I watch it. Like, oh, that's right. Like they work for her the way the flying monkeys worked for the Wicked Witch of the West.
When you told me that, I said, "Oh, that makes sense."
But it's funny because the Wicked Witch. I mean, she got flying monkeys, which is like badass. These guys, they kind of suck, right?
They do because the flying.
Okay, roller skate warriors, roll, roll, do the wheelie thing, spin, spin, spin.
Well, they have bad attitudes, and the flying monkeys just
At least they were servants.
they just did her
You
bidding.
give them bananas. They do what they're supposed to. Yeah, these
Exactly.
guys, they're jerks.
exactly.
Yeah,
Okay, so they can't go past the.
and they're all
deadly
sleeping
desert.
too.
Right.
Yeah.
But the funny thing is, she's like, go after them, but like they're flying, and then they get to the deadly desert, and a bunch of them like fall into the sand.
It's great because, man, this movie makes good on that. Boy, oh boy. Because, Dorothy said, it's established like, oh, you fall in the deadly desert, you turn into sand, you die. You die as sand. And, it's like, okay, again, it sounds like a kid's game, but you actually see it. It's like, oh, man, that's a cool effect. So that stupid Wheeler, we hate the Wheeler, so it's so nice.
There's like 3 of them.
It's so satisfying. You see them fall to their deaths, and suddenly it's like a really quick, a quick illusion where they turn into sand. Somebody made like, a plate of this guy's head. It's like a sandcastle like head, and then you see like the head like split apart. It's like, oh, that's so gnarly. And they're like, retreat! They're running away from sand. Like, oh man, this is great. This is so cool.
And the moose keeps flying towards the Gnome King, just right over the deadly desert. So eventually, surprise, surprise, the moose sled isn't, the best engineering, and it like breaks down.
I like the way this happens because I like any film that kind of lets you rest in its world. There's a moment where they're flying into the dark of night, and it's like you don't even see, they're just surrounded by clouds and the darkness and the moon, and Dorothy's asleep in the couch with Bellina. It's like, oh man, that's so cool. It's like they're taking a moment to let the characters rest, and the film is getting quiet for a moment, but you also see like the ropes are becoming slowly undone. So Dorothy wakes up to just chaos because all the ropes are breaking. The thing is coming apart in midair. And it's pretty wild because like apparently they're so high up that they're falling for some time.
Yeah. Well, they end up landing on the Gnome King's mountain, so that's
Landing perfectly, no one gets hurt really.
I mean, that's good. It's like very convenient.
Yeah, well they're way up there. Yeah, it's cool.
So the Gnome King discovers them because he's like, "What's all that ruckus going on up there?" And the rock things are like, "Well, hey, we'll go check it out."
Yeah.
So he discovers
And
them.
most importantly, like, did you see a chicken? No, sir, no chicken. Good.
Well, what happens to Bellina is she like falls inside of Jack's head.
Yeah, some real body horror. You got a chicken stuck inside your skull.
Yeah. And he just like lets her stay in there. Like,
He's very nice.
He's like, oh, I guess I have a chicken in my head now.
Yeah,
Like
it's
that.
that kind of a movie.
I mean, he doesn't really have a brain, so I guess.
If I only had a brain.
So Bellina is his
Although I gotta say,
brain.
these characters, something I noticed throughout the movie, all the main characters, Mr. TikTok and Jack Pumpkinhead, and then the Gump, they're not, the Cowardly Lion and the Tin Man and the Scarecrow, they're, very whimsical and sweet. Like, if I only had a heart. These guys are like, death is imminent, so we might as well just die. What is the point of life? It's so fruitless. Like, they're speaking in very existential tones. It's very like, man,
This is dark.
this movie is a bummer.
Okay, so she's kind of talking to the Gnome King, like, outside on the mountain.
Yeah, and he manifests, thanks to Will Vitton's mastery of claymation, he manifests on the side of the mountains inside, and he's speaking to them.
Yeah, because she's like, give back, restore Emerald City. And
he's a condescending jerk. He really is.
And he's kind of like, no, because the emeralds were always mine, and I just gave myself back what was mine.
Yeah.
And so, too bad, so sad, not going to happen.
And then he opens up the world and swallows them up. And there's this, it's a very simple effect. It's like, it's a blue screen effect of Firuza Balk, like in front of a blue screen. And she's seeing all the emeralds within the Gnome King's mountain. But she makes the point, like, why do you even need our gnome? Why do you need our emeralds and such? Because you have so much.
Yeah.
Why aren't you willing to share the wealth? And like, that's interesting. I wonder if there's some hidden meaning that if it's talking about, a takeover, a coup, this idea of sharing resources. But in any case, yeah, the Gnome King is a greedy jerk and he's completely
like,
condescending.
Too bad, they're mine.
Yeah.
And he says that he transformed the scarecrow into an ornament. So he has like all this room full of ornaments that he turned creatures into.
It's like his own personal thrift store.
Yeah. It's very weird.
It's cool. It's like all these little tchotchkes and knickknacks.
Yeah, so Dorothy's crying and the Gnome King is like comforting her, which is like, dude, really? You're going to comfort her after you just like told her that you're the reason all this happened?
Well, let's face it. How old is he? And he's been, other than his weird little lackey who appears on the wall. I mean, he probably hasn't never been in the presence of a human, at least not since he made everybody in Oz turn to stone.
What about Mombi?
Mombi doesn't count. He doesn't care. Mombi's like, Mommy's like an amusing thing to him. This is a powerful girl. This is the girl who took down the Wicked Witch of the West.
Well, that's true.
This is the Dorothy Gale from Kansas, as everybody keeps referring to her. That'd be like, oh, you're John McClane. You're Nakatomi Plaza, John McClane. Okay. Got it. You're the guy who knocked off Hans Gruber. You killed the Wicked Witch of the West. Ooh.
Oh, yeah. I know. And here Dorothy's like, come back to Oz. We'll have a few laughs. It'll be great.
Yippee-ki-yay, Mr. Scarecrow.
Okay, so he says, do you want to play a game to get the scarecrow back? And the game is basically each of you go into the ornament room one by one. You put your hand on the ornament, you yell out Oz, and you have 3 guesses. And
he leaves out the detail that if you do your 3 guesses and you don't guess on the right one, then you will also become an ornament.
Yeah. So he forgets to tell them that, and Dorothy's like, that's not fair.
It's interesting because there's a lot of characters in this movie that are lifeless. They're either lifeless or they're alive. Either you're the Gump before or after the powder. Or the people, the statues in Oz. So it really is talking about. Again, there's a lot of death in this movie, and it's this idea of like, look, you're either alive or you're a statue, or you're, a remnant of what used to be alive.
Yeah, and TikTok, he's always like, I really value my lifelessness.
Again, it's like, dude, been reading your Kierkegaard. Been winding up your existential thoughts. Very nice.
I know, I'm like, dang. Okay, so...
I think, therefore I am.
So Moose goes in, doesn't guess right.
Which is great because he's a couch and he's like muttering under his breath and just like really annoyed. Like, man, I love it. He's only been alive for a few hours. He's like, this sucks. I wish I was hanging on someone's wall. This is so degrading.
Jack goes in. Of course, he's not going to get anything. Yeah. So the Gnome King, I noticed every time someone goes in and like doesn't guess right, he turns more and more human-like.
Yeah, that's an eerie touch. I love it. But he does, a scene later, he reveals to Mom, he's like, I'm becoming human. Mm-hmm. So like that is part of the goal. It's like, yeah, this is great. Like this is a big bonus for me.
Then he reveals that he has her ruby slippers.
That's pretty wild. Although I want to point out a really weird, a really strange moment before. This movie's nothing but strange moments, right? So there's a scene where all the characters, right before they embark on the game, he fixes them refreshments. Remember that?
Yeah.
It's limestone pie and silver tea.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, okay, they're dead if they eat that crap.
I know. And Dorothy's like, It's kind of good. I'm like, why are you eating that?
It tastes, like when you suck on a thermometer, it tastes like that. It's like mercury. Have some.
I'd be like,
Let's go halvesies.
I'd be like, no thanks. I'm gonna stick with my lunch pail from the lunch pail tree.
No kidding, man. Yeah.
I have an extra ham sandwich here.
It's like that ham sandwich has been in the hot sun. It's gone bad. That's still better than this mercury, whatever this is. This
Hot silver.
hot silver. Oh my gosh, they're dead. Don't eat it, kid.
Okay, so he has the ruby slippers and he kind of like mocks her like,
Oh, no question. No, he's vicious. By the way, Nicole Williamson, I just want to say, Nicole Williamson, he plays Dr. Worley. He's also playing the Gnome King. And initially, the Gnome King is more of Will Vinton claymation. But when he finally becomes very human-like, it's Nicole Williamson under this remarkable makeup. He looks amazing. And again, it's like this is just the worst kind of adult. This is someone who is condescending to children. He is wicked. He is sarcastic. He is duplicitous. He's awful. He is everything every kid hates about an adult that they cannot trust. He's so despicable. I love what he and Jean Marsh, what they're representing in this film. Yeah, he's wonderful. And yeah, it is incredible that he's like, looky what I got. Because he's this big, he's this gray slab of stone. He's got these bedazzled shoes on.
yeah. And he keeps like hiding them behind like,
Looky, you want these, don't you?
Why did you come here?
I told you why.
You came all this way for a scarecrow? Are you sure you didn't come back for these?
My ruby slipper.
No. My ruby slippers. They just fell out of the sky one day. You were so anxious to get home. They're very powerful. They made it possible for me to conquer the Emerald City.
well, and so the thing is, he's like, yeah, when you went back to Kansas, they fell and I stole them. And that's how I conquered the Emerald City. And, I just realized that when Dorothy was in Kansas talking to that creepy pseudo doctor,
Same dude.
and, she's talking about, oh, it's the same dude.
It's the same actor.
Oh, see, I didn't know that. Okay. So he's like, well, where are the slippers now? And she's like, I lost them.
Right, exactly. And in this version, in this world, not only is it the same character, but he's basically saying, it's your fault, kid.
Yeah.
It's your fault that I took over. It's your fault that Oz lost. It's your fault that this world that you love and your friends that you love, it is your freaking fault that all of this happened. So he's trying to defeat her on every level that he can, because on the one hand, he is a sorcerer and he can just turn her into stone, as it's been established, but he wants to play with her. He wants to taunt her because, again...
Well, he does give her a chance to go back to Kansas.
Right.
He's like, I'll just send you back right now.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, I can't abandon my friends.
Which shows how powerful she is that he'll even give her this out. It's like, look, this is a way to get rid of her. Let's play to her. Let's play to her guilt. Let's like look, you barely know these guys. The guy that, that talking couch, you don't care about him anyways. Like, just walk away. Yeah. And to her credit, she's like, no, absolutely not. I would never abandon my friends. He's like, oh, okay. Sorry, I forgot you're Dorothy Gale of Nakatomi Plaza. I shouldn't mess with you, kid.
So then the rocks tell the Gnome King, like, hey, there's something wrong with TikTok. And she's like, oh, he probably needs to be wound. So she goes in there and he's like, hey, I'm pretending because when I touch the thing, and I get it wrong, maybe you'll be able to see what I turn into.
It's a brilliant plan. It really is.
Yeah, and then you
so
can,
great.
figure it out. But so TikTok turns into an ornament. Dorothy, the lights go out, so she doesn't actually really.
Yeah, so
see.
it does, and it's not being neither here nor there, which is kind of heartbreaking because then suddenly she's alone in this room, in this huge thrift store. Meanwhile, we see Mombi on her way, which is one of the wildest things in the movie, because these wheelers are acting like a dog sled, and she's like, faster! She's whipping them wildly.
How do they get across the?
It's an underground tunnel.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's
the
like a subway
underground.
tunnel. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the underground tunnel. That's right. Yeah, and she's...
To the subway!
Yeah, she is whipping them. It's horrible.
Oh, it's amazing. Like, wow. Like, how much fun is Jean Marsh having in this movie? Like, oh my gosh. Yeah, yeah.
She's probably having the most fun out of everyone because her character is so off the rails.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Yeah, and by the way, I mean, apparently she was a really lovely lady. And she's still with us. She's in her 80s. She's still acting. She still does stuff all the time. It's primarily, she's an English actress. So she does a lot of like British television and such, so forth. But yeah, and a theater legend. I love that in this country, we know her primarily as these two despicable, awful, evil queens. But yeah, she's great. She's great in this.
All right, so Dorothy finds this huge emerald ornament.
Yeah, and great guess. Yeah.
And that's who the Scarecrow turns out to be. And the Gnome King, like, freaks out because she got it right.
And what in blazes?
And Mombi shows up while Dorothy's in there. And the Gnome King ends up, like, imprisoning her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's great. So... but Dorothy finds the moose and Jack. Like she ends up finding
everything. It's everything that's green.
Yeah,
you see Oz over it, and they
all the green things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the Gnome King is now really back to the claymation.
Yeah, he's completely. Yeah, his plan of becoming human is completely gone. Dorothy has completely reversed this game for him.
Yeah. So he picks up Jack.
He starts eating stuff. Is what he
starts
does.
Eating stuff.
He eats a part of the couch, which like no loss. It's like it's fine. They'll find another couch for the Gump. It's fine.
Yeah, but finally he sees that Bellina is inside of Jack's head, and this and he's just like a chicken, and Bellina lays an egg right into his stomach.
It's so great, and you hear it like rolling, like it's like a roulette wheel. Before it like falls out of the pumpkin head into his gullet.
Yeah.
And his eyes immediately water over. It's like, oh man, this is like he's about to go into apoplectic shock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we find out that, well, chicken eggs are poison to gnomes.
And by the way, just in case this movie hasn't completely seized control of all of your nightmares, there's all these trolls and demons, these claymation creatures that have materialized to attack the main characters. And when they see that the Gnome King... is about to have like the world's greatest allergic reaction. They're like, poison. It's great. It's so cool. Because even though like, oh man, we are out of here. This guy's about to have like...
He's about to melt and just disappear.
Yeah, it's the Wicked Witch. I'm melting. Yeah, it's that.
So Dorothy gets back the ruby slippers. And, she restores the Emerald City and all the people in it.
Boy, does she ever. That's a glorious scene. I love that so much because, again, like I love this movie so much to just jump to that really quickly. I love this movie, but like it's not a happy film. So when she clicks the ruby slippers and suddenly all the figures in Oz come to life, that's magical. I love that scene so much. Although I do wonder about the headless chicks.
Yeah, they come back.
But remember, there was one that was on the ground. The movie doesn't acknowledge that. There was one of the, because they're all in a circle, but there is one headless dancer that is like over on the ground.
You don't think she comes back to life?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I feel like there's some continuity problem. Anyway, neither here nor there.
All right. Well, okay. Dorothy pulls Ozma out of the glass.
Yeah.
And you realize that was the girl who saved her from being electrocuted at the beginning. Yeah,
and we also learned that Ozma, it used to be her palace until Mombi used her magic to...
Yeah, to imprison her. Mm-hmm. And so Ozma is the rightful ruler. And so I think Dorothy feels like, great, you take the ruby slippers and I can go back to Kansas. And she says, like, you'll be able to, like, see us again anytime you want. But Bellina stays in Oz. I mean, does she just feel so powerful now that her eggs killed the Gnome King that she's like, I'm staying here, man. I'm appreciated.
I think she understands that Kansas is the most boring place on planet Earth. And that anywhere, even a place where things like wheelers and headless maidens exist, even that's better than being in a place as boring as Kansas.
Wow. All right. I hope my family doesn't listen to this episode.
I'm sure the Kansas Tourism Board will send us an email.
All right. Well, Dorothy wakes up by the river back in Kansas.
Yeah, what a beautiful shot of a close-up of her eye again. And she's just kind of looking at this little twig swirling in a bit of water. It's almost like the close-up of her eye is so intense. It's almost like the shot of Janet Leigh in Psycho. It's that intimate and close. And again, it's like reflective of the opening scene. Like, this is a haunted child. This is a kid who's, had visions that, the adults can never comprehend or grasp, really. And it's great. Toto finds her.
Yeah, Toto finds her, and her Uncle Henry finds her, and it's so
good for
sweet.
nothing.
It's
her.
really sweet.
Yeah.
Because he's like so happy she's alive, and we find out the clinic was struck by lightning and burned to the ground.
Yeah. Although, what about the people in the basement? Aw.
You know what? Their brains were mush. What was going to happen?
Oh. God, that's grisly.
It's like months before 1900. Nobody has any like resources or medicine to save them.
Oh, man.
They're out of their misery now. I know. It's
Yay.
This movie is brutal. Oh my God.
Well, that's good. Yeah. Well, it's cool that he dies, because it's like, he went back in to save his instruments. Like, idiot.
Yeah.
No, not my electro machine.
Wait, I think they said that everybody got out except the doctor.
Except for him, yeah.
So maybe the freaks got out.
Well, did they even know about the freaks in the basement?
I don't know. We should look it up. It's really.
The thing is, you know what? I don't even want to know.
I know.
Yeah, there's all sorts of like under the surface stuff in this film. It's like, again, like how the Wheelers can tear people apart. I'm sure there's an answer to that. I don't want to know.
I don't want to know. All right, so Dorothy's back home. How long has she been gone? Like, their house has been rebuilt. She has a new bedroom. I mean, everything is like.
Well, it's probably been a few days.
A few days.
Yeah.
It had to have been longer than that for their whole house to be rebuilt.
No. I think at the end of the film, some time has gone by. I think, when she, you're not wrong, but I think it's just a matter of how the film cuts, because, she escapes from the sanitarium, she ends up in the water, and presumably that is where, she gets washed ashore.
Yeah.
And I would say probably
like the next day.
Yes. So I think after she's found, then we're cutting to
like months later.
Yes.
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. But there is the possibility, and it's not a nice one, that everything that happens
is a dream.
Not only that, Dorothy's about to have the electrodes put on her head, and a second before the electrodes are put on her head, that's where the power out happens. And then that's how the girl in the mirror is somehow able to get into that room. I mean, everything we're seeing in this movie could simply be, like the quick story that her mind is giving her right before she dies. And it's very peculiar how she exits Oz. Remember where she's exiting Oz and she's like, it's so bright. Why is it so bright? That's peculiar. Because if her brain is being pierced, or if her brain is being full of electricity, wouldn't she see electrical light?
Ugh, I do not like this version that you've just figured out.
I mean, we talk about the last. There's a few things that are interesting. So in the final moments, NTM goes to visit Dorothy, and sure enough, Dorothy is still talking about Oz, and they're like, all right. You survived the electric Kool-Aid acid trip over there at Worley's sanitarium. We'll let it slide that you're still talking about the Oz gibberish, but Dorothy calls on Ozma, and immediately it's like a FaceTime chat. She has this in her mirror, it's like right there with the chicken, like, hi. Can you hear me? No, your microphone's off. Turn it on. Hi.
She's on Zoom.
Yeah, and she's got Belina. I mean, it's kind of eerie the way they're looking at her, but again, like there's something dreamlike about it, and the fact that the dream world and the real world are overlapping, it does make me question if it's really happening. You think she
got electrocuted?
I don't know that she ever got out of the sanitarium. I don't know. So did it not burn down? I think she might have died. She could have. The full film might be her dream.
Well, what happens in the book? Do we know?
Well, in the book, I mean, that's a whole other thing. I mean, whether, because I haven't read The Land of Oz, but I read Ozma of Oz, and it had a lot of the events and characters in this movie, although it was a little different because it dealt so much about being in Oz. But like, it's very much like Alice in Wonderland. It's like it's very extremely ambiguous about whether it's real or not, or whether it's a child's imagination. Whether these worlds, the world on the other side of the looking glass is actually real. But I mean, it's interesting because not only do we get that bit where she's able to see Ozma and Bellina looking at her through the mirror, kind of creepy, but then she goes outside and she's playing around, and there's this beautiful long shot where she's, looking at her uncle working on the house. Camera pulls back, credits start, but then it ends on a freeze frame, and we see that it's like this photo. It's a curious touch, because a photo is, a captured memory. It's like a captured dream. Is any of this real? I mean, is this the best case scenario? Was this once again Dorothy experiencing a traumatic event, and the confines of her mind were what she used to get out of it, to survive it, to process the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
She survived the tornado. In this case, she survived, horrendous
Electroshock therapy.
Yeah. Abuse by, the hands of these doctors. So did she survive it, or is she a victim of it? Is she, one of those wailing souls in the basement of Dr. Worley's? Yeah.
Oh man, this is even more depressing than I thought. Wow.
Brought to you by Walt Disney. So that's Return to Oz. And this movie has acquired a really healthy cult following over the years. It did terribly in theaters. Word of mouth was pretty dire for this movie. I remember when it came out, I was really curious about it because the trailers were everywhere, the poster was everywhere, and it looked cool. It did, but there was something about it, and I thought, I don't really want to see it in the theater. But I started watching it a lot when it was on the Disney Channel, which was not long after it was in theaters, and I think it was on HBO too, and renting it. I saw it over and over and again, and one of the reasons is this is a film that even though it scared me, I really respected it. I could really tell, like, there's something to this. This isn't just, it's not stupid. It's very disturbing, but I felt very drawn to it, and I kept going back again and again and watching it. And I'm in my 40s now, and it still disturbs me. But I think there's a richness to this movie. I really do. And again, like, this is a case where there's just no market for this movie in 85. I mean, like, this was the age of like teen sex comedies and, special effects movies and Rambo. Like, this film really, really stood out. There wasn't a proper way to market it. Definitely not from Disney at this point. They didn't know what they were doing. This is a few years. Actually, this is the year that Michael Eisner took over Disney. Because Michael Eisner came in there, 85, 86, basically cleaned up shop. He's like, okay, we got to stop doing these Fox and the Hound, Robin Hood movies. We're going to let's like really rejuvenate animation. And he had Jeffrey Katzenberg take over the animation wing, and boom, you had Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, all on top of each other. They actually found a way for Disney to make edgier, even R-rated movies. They came up with this Touchstone Pictures line. So that Touchstone Pictures, like, those are Disney films, in some cases made on the Disney lot, but like they could be R-rated films, but because it doesn't say Disney, it says Touchstone, they were able to distribute them. Everything was just like really clicking once Eisner came around. But before Eisner did show up, there were these weird little miracles that were coming out of the company, and this was one of them. I'm definitely one of the people who are of the cult of this film. I love this movie so much. Every time I go back to it, I'm moved by it. I'm disturbed by it. I've always said, like, a horror movie is a film where the villain is just the strongest and most powerful character in the story. That's really what makes a horror film. And this is a horror film because the characters that Nicole Williamson and Jean Marsh are playing are so vivid and so scary and so rotten to the core. You're really rooting for their comeuppance. You're not rooting for them to kill the protagonist. You really care about Dorothy Gale, and she seems very vulnerable. It helps that it's not Judy Garland. It is a very little girl playing this character, which just makes it so much more immediate. The special effects are fantastic. They still look good. I really didn't even notice anything like, matte painting. No, like, everything looks real. The music by David Shire. And this is the only film directed by Walter Murch, the legendary editor of for example, Apocalypse Now, The Godfather, The English Patient. He's considered the world's greatest editor. Like, you know, he's the guy. And this is the only film he ever directed. Apparently, Disney did not like what they saw, and they fired him at one point. And George Lucas vouched for him. He's like, no, he's my boy. So George Lucas got in there and got him back. And apparently, Lucas was a big supporter of him. But yeah, even though Disney, you know, the company really tried, but like there just was not an audience for this film, and it just died after a week. And now it's like one of those premier cult films. And I'm glad that it's caught on. I love that it's on Disney Plus, because for a while, the company, they wouldn't even acknowledge this movie for a while. There was a period where when it came out on video cassette, they didn't even have the Disney logos on the box.
We're embarrassed.
I have an edition of this movie on DVD where it's like there's no Disney logo on it at all. And you know, now it's like it's on Disney Plus, and it even opens up with Walt Disney Presents. Like, yeah, sure he did. No, he didn't. Walt Disney would probably have never. I think Walt Disney probably would have been horrified by this movie. And I know that people who loved The Wizard of Oz, and certainly in '85, they hated this film. It's like, there's no singing. It's sad. It's scary. But you know what? The original Wizard of Oz was scary. Margaret Hamilton is the Wicked Witch of the West. Really scary. And we've talked about that, because I've been like, hey, can I show Wizard of Oz to our 7-year-old girl? Like, no, it'll traumatize her. I'm like, can I show Return of Oz? Like, oh, okay, yeah, let's watch it as a family.
No, I did
not.
No,
you didn't.
Okay. No. All right, because your theory disturbed me so much.
Oh, sorry.
I just had to Google.
You looked it up? Oh, no.
No, some random person on Reddit. I thought this was an interesting theory. They think that Dorothy did die in getting electroshock therapy, and that Oz is purgatory.
Jeez.
And then when she finally works her way through all of the, like, you know, people and... Okay, I don't really know how purgatory works, but she, like...
It's like living in Kansas, but anyway.
She fixes it, and then going to Kansas is like heaven now, because now she's back to where she feels safe.
Yeah.
So that is a disturbing idea, that she actually dies in this sanatorium.
I mean, look, the idea that she dies in the sanitarium, it makes sense to me, because the movie really switches gears. It's building towards this death sentence, is what it is. And she has the little headphones put on her head. And I mean, it's just seconds before she's supposed to die that suddenly the light goes out. I mean, the movie it feels like the film is really switching gears at that point. So that's why I think there's some merit to that idea. I don't like it. I don't want Dorothy Gale to die. Again, because I really...
But like, who is the effed up person that was like, yeah, this is a great idea for a children's film? This is so weird.
Yeah, but you know... some children's films, you know, they present threats and antagonists that are silly, buffoonish. I mean, any kid who has, you know, suffered from, you know, doctors that have misdiagnosed or abused or hurt them, any child that has had an authority figure abuse or, abuse their power and authority, I find that there are things in this movie that are relatable to anyone who's had a rotten childhood, anyone who has had a teacher or anyone of power mistreat them. So I think films like this are valuable, because even though it's a fantasy, a horror fantasy, it's giving you, it's like, look, like, you know, sometimes these things, we survive them. You know, and sometimes to survive.
If she didn't survive, then.
But you know what she never does? She never compromises who she is. She's a strong little girl, and she stands up to these monsters. Whether it's real or not is almost it's neither here nor there, because Dorothy Gale's reality is the reality that we are in, whether it's real or not. We're with her, and the film does not explain whether it's real or not, which is an indication of like it could all be real. Because Dorothy thinks it's real, so therefore we're in the same boat as she is.
Yeah.
So no, I think there's value to these kind of movies. I mean, you know, with the obvious, they look like, you know, decades later, Harry Potter, those movies are nightmare generators. Nobody complained. It's like, they're faithful to the books, we love them. But like those films, it's this very similar idea. It's like, look, if you've ever been to a boarding school or a private school and you've had adults that were duplicitous, who you can't trust, who are rotten to you, you've had friends who misabuse, who, you know, just all the awful things that happen to you when you're a young person, that's what those Harry Potter books and movies are about. They're about like how you survive these situations, how like, you know, taking a math test and having a crush on someone who doesn't have a crush on you back, and you fail at sports and you have teachers who are out to get you. It's what it feels like to be in those fantastical worlds. It's very relatable. So I imagine like a little girl who went to like a boarding school, or, you know, had to live with an aunt or uncle, or, you know, was forced to undergo like a medical procedure that they did not want. I'm sure they could look at this and go, oh yeah, that's how it feels. Because sometimes art is about like, look, it's going to be okay. We're all in this together.
Yeah, until your aunt drops you off at an electroshock therapy place.
Well, you know, for one thing, the aunt is not able to look on Reddit. She's not able to like, you know, like look up, oh, like, you know, Dr. Worley Freak Show, you know, .com. No, like, you know, there aren't like the YouTube videos like, don't go there. No, it's like,
she's like, oh no, everyone's been giving it 0 stars. I guess it's a no.
I mean, look, I've certainly been to places where I'm like, oh, this place is a total lie, total hoax. I mean, you and I have been to like places where I'm like, you know, this office, this clinic, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I'm just disturbed by your theory. So it's like as if the movie wasn't already bad enough, like horror wise for this child. Now I'm like, oh man, what if she's actually dead?
It's like the ending of Total Recall, and many have said that the ending of Total Recall is probably as awful as you think it is. The ending of Total Recall suddenly ends with a bright, shining light. And one of the last lines is like, you know, what if this is all a dream? If it is, you know, kiss me before I wake up. But like before you wake up, oh my gosh. So like the whole film could be a fantasy that the Arnold Schwarzenegger character is having, and he's about to have a lobotomy and his life is over. In the ending of Brazil, like there's a lot of films that present this idea that we can have a whole life in our minds, that they might be just moments, but they could seem like a whole lifetime of adventure, of accomplishment, of catharsis. You know, that's what O. Henry's An Occurrence in Owl Creek Bridge, that's what that's about. The guy who's about to be hung, and he gets off the noose and he runs, and he has this whole thing where he gets away, and suddenly, the noose is around his neck, and he's actually got hung. You know, to spoil that story, it's about a guy who he fantasizes that he escaped the hangman's noose, and he didn't. A lot of stories deal with that. This idea of like, look, we're all going to die. Sometimes we go the way we want in our sleep, and sometimes we don't. What happens is what we do when we know that we're going to die. Dorothy Gale, whether she lives or dies, no, what's important is that she never compromises who she is. She's always a friend to those who need friendship. She is stronger than those stupid, awful adults who are abusing her. And ultimately, the fact that she's a good person is what makes her come out in the end. And by the way, I like this Dorothy Gale better than Judy Garland's. I do. I don't think this movie is as good as The Wizard of Oz, but I like Fairuza Balk's take in the character better than anyone else's.
Yeah. And you know what? I like that it's not a musical. I don't care about like the fact that there's...
I kind of want to see a number with all those heads.
All the heads singing.
Yeah.
Somewhere over the rainbow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's
Can you imagine that?
Nightmare City right there. No, thank you. So, all right. How many stars do you give this?
4.
Oh, 4.
I think it's one of the best films in 1985. I do.
Wow.
Yeah, and the other movie that came out that year that I love, that was the year of After Hours, which we spoke about recently. Mm-hmm. And Brazil is my number 1. And Brazil is also a movie about fantasy and reality, and how sometimes they are interchangeable depending on who is having the dream. I love movies like this where it's like you don't really know what's real or not real because you're inside the psyche of the main character, and it's like this. It could be either way. The movie's not telling us, and I kind of dig that.
Yeah.
As opposed to like, it was all a dream. I hate those kind of movies. It's like, no. It was all a dream. So like, it turns out it didn't even happen. No, I prefer this where it's like
ambiguous.
Yeah.
He loves ambiguity.
Yeah. No, I love this film. And I know it's a tough one. And I know a lot of people like me, children of the 80s, are like, this is a scary, messed up movie. It is. But it's better and smarter than most people remember, I think.
Okay, I think I give it 3 stars because I do like the special effects are amazing. The acting is great. The story is wackadoo, but it's still very engaging. even though it's disturbing. And I mean, I did enjoy watching it again, but it still freaked me out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Likewise.
So-
Yeah.
So yeah, won't be showing this to be for like at least another decade.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I don't know. I felt like I was a little, even though I didn't see it in the theater, I did feel like I was a little too young when I saw it. But I think by the time I was in, I don't know, maybe high school, when I started looking at it, every couple of years I look at it, and yeah, I think it's a masterpiece. I really do.
Okay.
So I hope he sees it. I hope she sees it when she's a young woman. I don't want her to see it like when she's 40. I think she should see it when she's young. But
yeah, I know. I'm not saying that, but definitely not this year or next year or the year after that.
not this decade.
All right. Well, do you have any other final thoughts?
No. I think I'm glad that people are still talking about this movie. I mean, right now we're dealing with summer movies. There's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of very obvious choices we could have gone with the summer of '85. This was not an obvious choice, but I feel like a lot of people, this film resonates with them because they have very strong feelings about this movie, and I'm glad. Love it or hate it, it's a film that you really don't forget. But I think it's a film that people do need to encounter, and certainly if you love fantasy, if you're a fantasy fan, like check this thing out. It's better and smarter than you remember, I think.
All right.
Yeah.
I think that does it for Return to Oz.
Dorothy Gale!